Hello, hello. Welcome to Mentally a Badass. I'm excited to introduce Ana, the founder of the Christian Professionals Network Worldwide. Ana is dedicated to combating relational poverty by blending business networking with faith based community support. Through CPNW, she pairs mentors with shelter residents, creating lasting professionals and personal connections. Ana's commitment extends beyond CPNW with her involvement in various charitable organizations and as a best selling author. We're thrilled to have her here to share her incredible journeys of resilience and community transformation. So, welcome to the podcast. I'm so happy to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much. So excited to be here and share my journey with your audience.
Yes, absolutely. And first, before we begin, I just want to say I think what you're doing is amazing. Having a mentor connect with someone who is homeless. I actually was thinking about this recently, like the past week, because I have like a feel for, I sympathize a lot with people who are homeless. I never personally experienced it, but I just like I always want to like be there in any way I can help. So seeing that I saw your profile and I'm like, I definitely want to talk to this person. I think that I'm excited to see what you have to say, and especially since you've been through, poverty and such. So, just like in every mentally about us episode, we're gonna go deep into your past because we like to start there to see where you came from. So let's chat about your early life in Russia.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up as an immigrant in Russia. So my family is from the country Georgia in Eastern Europe. And I lived in Russia for 10 years between ages of 2 and 12. And it was pretty challenging on many aspects. So I grew up in a highly volatile environment. My father was an abusive alcoholic. He would just abandon us for days at a time. My mother didn't work. She was a stay-at-home mom. I have a younger brother who was 6 years younger, and so she was taking care of him while I was in school. And I just remember that hunger was just like this constant enemy, I guess, of mine. My father would leave and leave us without money or food. And so we would be hungry. And my mother, at some point, basically out of desperation, started sending me as an 8-year-old girl out in the streets after school, where I would go and start collecting bottles, and then would take those bottles to a recycling plant, and you would get like a few cents per bottle. And so you had to make a lot of trips to be able to collect enough money to then go and buy bread. And so then I would be literally the breadwinner of the day. And after I would collect enough, I would go and take, the bread, and that's what we would eat. And I remember there was this one day when I was going to this recycling plant, and there were these boys inside. And when they saw me, they started making fun of me that I was poor and calling me names, and I just like started crying. Obviously, I was so hurt. And there was this nice lady who was working there, and she saw this whole interaction. And she was so kind that that day she gave me enough money. So she gave me a lot of extra so that I didn't have to keep going back to the recycling plant, and I could just go and buy bread. And I just remember that moment was the moment when I decided as an 8-year-old, I am never going to be poor again. And I'm never going to be hungry again when I grow up. And so that was a very defining moment for me. And so now looking back at that situation, I realized that when you're an immigrant, you are very relationally poor. So we didn't have any community around us. We didn't have friends. And so when we were going through this hardship, we didn't have people we could go to. And so it was really difficult dealing with it. And frankly, we were on the verge of becoming homeless because my father stopped paying rent. And so eventually we had this landlord who would constantly come, start knocking on doors, trying to basically be like, hey, where's my rent? And so on top of the hunger, now we had to kind of tiptoe in our own home and be quiet so that the landlord would not hear us, right? And so the only reason why we did not become homeless is because of my grandmother. My grandmother ended up selling all of her like jewelry, her gold, her anything that valuable that she had. And then she bought us plane tickets, and we moved from Russia to Georgia at that point. But I realize now that if not for my grandmother, we would have become homeless. And back then, Russia didn't have like shelters, or, I mean, we would have had a really, really difficult life. And so I think that gives me a lot of compassion about what I do now. And that's kind of my why. But I'm going to pause here and let you just kind of tell me where you want the story to go before I start going into what I do now.
Yeah, of course. So I got a couple of things from everything you said, just from like a mental health point
Mhm.
of view. So when you were saying that you went out there and you were collecting the cans and you had to at the age of 8, when normally at the age of 8, we hope that kids can just go out and play and not have to worry about where their next meal is coming from.
Mhm.
So when your mother made you go out to because you had, you had to survive, it put you in a position where you're already in survival, and then also you don't want that ever happening again. No one ever wants to feel like they have to always be in survival. So I think that also can stem, your work ethic. If you think about it like this, if you're put to work at a very young age, you bring that to your adulthood, and you bring that passion, and it's because at one point you didn't have a choice, so you just kind of bring that I guess mindset and energy to an adult. So I just wanted to just show right there that that's definitely where your work ethic like stem from. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to, of course, psychoanalyze you or anything like
No,
that.
no, not at all. Really,
um
really good
yeah,
point.
so I did notice that. And then also, I feel like I always like hate hearing when people are getting bullied over just, being poor. It's like it's already hard enough, right? It's already hard enough being in poverty, and now you have people laughing at you, which makes it just like harder. So, you know, I know that you already mentioned that you were upset and you were crying, but then you said that somebody came to you and helped you and gave you money, so you had to skip, so you were able to like get a little bit, moving
Mhm.
forward ahead than having to pretty much be like, I guess in a way we say like in the US kind of like chasing the dollar, like the rat. Do you know what
Yeah,
I'm referring to? Yeah, and I know you know because I saw your thing about corporate America
yeah,
in your thing. So that's great, and that actually like makes a lot of sense because what you do now, you're pretty much doing that. Like you are that woman, and you're creating like this network where you can have other people be that person. And as you were saying, being an immigrant, you don't have as many resources as someone who is not. And like I come from an immigrant, I'm not an immigrant, but like my dad came from Cuba. So
mm,
my dad came from, communism, and my dad, he has a huge work ethic. He's been working, well, he didn't start working at the age of 8, but he started at the age of 14, where he would like drive like a truck to deliver stuff in like New York City before school. Like I remember him telling me that. He's been working ever since. So, thankfully I didn't have to do what he, had to go through, but I saw it. Well, I didn't see him at 14, but you know what I mean.
yeah,
So yeah, so then he went from that being able to own his own business and such. So even though I wasn't in your position, like I've seen it. And so
yeah.
the question I do want to ask you actually is, were there systems or structures you encountered that made it like more difficult to escape poverty? Like do you have like any like moments or events that made it a little bit more difficult for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you grow up in that environment, it's really difficult. Honestly, I look back and I still think it's a miracle that I was able to get out of that cycle because it is a cycle. So my family has generational trauma that gets passed on generation to generation on both sides of my family until very rarely you have a cycle breaker, and that's me and my family. And so when I started reflecting on it, I just could tell that basically the previous generation's hurt gets passed on to the young generation, and they become abused until they grow up, but then they become abusers, then the next generation get abused, and the cycle just continues. And so when you're poor, when you have these kind of issues like drug abuse, alcohol abuse, right, it just it gets ingrained in you that this is the only life. You don't see anything else. And so I'll give you an example. When I was growing up, I thought that it was normal to basically have families where a husband drinks, beats all of us, right? Abuses us physically, mentally, until I was 16. And so when I was 16, I came to the United States for the first time as an exchange student, and I stayed with this amazing host family, and they were in their 60s. And that was the first time I've seen what a healthy family looks like. This was the first time I've seen where a woman had equal voice, equal rights, like she wasn't abused. And so taking out of the regular environment that I grew up and seeing something different. And then I say, oh, this is what I want. And so that year was a really defining year for me, because I decided I need to leave my country no matter what, because I was told from young age my worthiness is only based on what kind of men I attract and what I can do. So, and suddenly I'm in an environment where it's not just about that. It's about you being your own individual self, you achieving your dreams, you having, you know, identity outside of your husband's. And that was just really, really incredible. And I'm so grateful for that moment. But speaking of the mental health issues, I just can tell you my childhood has had an effect where I, as an adult, had to overcome. And so one of the things that I used to do when I became an immigrant of the United States, and even when I already was making a lot of money in my corporate career, I had this thing where my fridge and all my cupboards had to be full with food. I just was not feeling well and calm if all of those were not completely stocked. And that just again comes from that lack, right? That hunger, that reminder, oh, what if I'm going to be hungry again? I wasn't able to skip any meals. I just was getting anxious if for some reason I wasn't able to eat at a time when I was hungry. And so that's a lot that came again from that trauma that I experienced as a child. I carried a lot of shame as well. So some additional things that I had to do as a child. My mother asked me to steal food, so I had to go into some gardener's garden to steal dill for a soup she was making. And as an 8-year old, I just felt so much fear and shame, right? Because you knew this was wrong. I also felt shame because out of hunger, I've stolen food from my classmates out of their bags because I just was starving. And so, like, I had to process all of those emotions as an adult because you know you've done is wrong, and you still carry that shame for a long time, even though you know this is out of desperation. You still carry it. And but that gave me a perspective on everything that I hear in today's world, right? I think some crimes really happen out of desperation. I really think when people are hungry, when they just see no outlet, they don't see that anything else good is going to happen in their lives, they just do things. And it gives me so much compassion and forgiveness toward them, because I know I did some things I would never do today. I would never steal, but back then I just did because I was starving. And so I want to bring this perspective because I think, like, a lot of the times we just need to understand a person's story and where they're coming from, because you just never know. And there's a lot of stigma around homelessness. People think that all homeless people become because they're drug addicts or alcoholics, which is not the case. If you look about it, it's only about 14% of cases. The rest of the homelessness is really just families who go through difficult situations.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. And as you were saying that, I mean, with when it comes to like crime and such, it definitely majority comes from, of course, like poverty, but there's always a reason why everybody does something. Like if you came from, let's say if someone came from like the perfect family and they don't really have trauma, they're not going to go out there and like start stealing things and such. And then if you think about, people think, well, the rich are doing things that like criminals and such, but it's like there's like this whole idea that like, oh, like rich people don't have problems. And like I hate when people say that, because it's like they have their own problems. There's like,
Yeah.
for example, let's say like a boy acts out, right? Acts out in school or does things that are like unforgivable or whatever. Well, that, you know, that man, that boy can be coming from a family that neglects him or he doesn't feel loved. I mean, of course it depends what he does. Like if he's out here raping girls, that's a whole different story. But I think like my point is that people forget that there was something that came before that. Like people just don't go out and just do things for like for fun. You know what I mean? Like even if they think it's just for fun, there's still something behind that.
Yeah.
And something I wanted to bring up is that in the US, I really hate how like the system is where they focus more on punishment than to, you know, spend our tax money on resources that will prevent that. And
Right.
like our prisons are like overcrowded and such. So my question for you, I know what like we're definitely going to keep are going to talk about what you do yourself, but would you ever like in a way kind of I guess speak to I guess like when it comes to like the justice system and try to, I'm not gonna say like change laws, but they but you kind of get what I'm saying, where
Mhm.
it's like how like kind of messed up the justice system is. Like I guess
Yes.
really what you do is your whole, because what you're doing is it's not obviously sponsored by, you know, the state or it's or anything like that, right?
No.
You're doing it and it's like obviously supported by like the members and such. But
Mhm.
you know, like what do you think about like really pushing for the government to actually, you know, do what you're doing and like I hope I'm kind of like making
Yeah,
some
I
sense
get it.
here.
Yeah. So, so you're right on the money, because part of the reasons why we started this organization is because there's been a recent law that was passed by the Supreme Court in June, where homelessness became punishable by law. And when I
Mhm.
heard that they did that, I was just like, wow, this is again just an easier way to get people off the street and put them in the prison. But listen to what you're doing to their lives. Now they have a criminal record. They come out of prison. They cannot get jobs. They're going to be homeless again. And then you're again going to put them in jail. And so basically, you're giving these humans no future, because you're just basically out of sight, out of mind kind of policy. And so, we started looking in a lot of the research on why homelessness happens. And it's a understudied term. We're actually doing a lot of like research about it and trying to bring it to public. But the term relational poverty is the number one reason why people become homeless. And so think about this. There's 34 million of Americans who live on poverty line right now. So these 34 million people are paycheck to paycheck. And should anything unexpected happen in their lives and suddenly they cannot pay their rent, basically what would determine most of the time if they will become homeless or not is whether they have family, friends, faith community. If they're completely isolated, they don't have any emergency contact, they have no other choice. They become homeless. And a lot of the times, so majority of homelessness is actually unseen. These are people living in their cars and extended hotel stays in shelters. And currently the system is set up where the shelters are providing the basic needs, right? So roof over your head, food, a lot of them focus on getting them jobs, which is wonderful and great. But again, that piece of relational poverty is not fixed. And so you again are out of homelessness, back into your house, but you're again relationally poor. Well, guess what? Five years down the road, something again happens. You're back in the street because nothing has changed. And so we said, what is it that we can do that's different to break this cycle? And we said, we need to be that missing piece of the relational poverty. And so that's why this one-on-one mentorship becomes so important, because you suddenly have somebody who is there for them. So a lot of the times when we survey people who are homeless and we ask them, what is it that you wish for? You know, what's number one reason and number one answer we receive is, I wish there was somebody who would check on me. They just feel like they are unseen, unheard, nobody cares. And so I live in the state of Georgia right now. In the state of Georgia, there are 10,000 homeless right now. Don't you think in a state that has so many millions of people, we could not find 10,000 mentors to pair with the homeless and get them out of homelessness? I mean, this is such a fixable problem. And so we're really trying to prove this concept one homeless shelter at a time in our state, so that then we can take this concept nationally and say, the solution is not putting them into jail. The solution is they need community around them. They need somebody that believes in them and tells them, you can do it. You're worthy. I mean, I used to be atheist, and I came to know God through a homeless woman. So I tell the story because homeless people are considered to be on the bottom of the societal pyramid in our country. But if a homeless person was able to save me and really transform my life, how can we say that every life doesn't matter? Every person could change this society, can really make a positive impact. And so I just hope that, with this program, we will show the government as well that the solution is not jail. The solution is something different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do have a question for you. So,
Yeah.
because since you said you've done like a lot of research, talked to homeless people, there's a lot of like conversation around where, you know, okay, so in Florida, I live in Florida. It like you were saying, it was kind of like people were getting like charged for pretty much being homeless. Like they took away like certain benches and such, and like it's because people were complaining like, oh, we don't want homeless people in our neighborhood and yada yada yada. But it's like, and it's not. So they have shelters. So they say, so people will say like, why don't they just go to shelters, right? And then people who have been through that says like, oh, shelters have all these rules, or it's corrupt, or this or that. So what, I guess, what do you have to say to people who refuse to go to a shelter? Like if there is that resource for them and they're not utilizing it, like what's your feedback on that?
So I've done some research about it, and the kind of homeless that you refer to that's really sleep in the streets and who you typically see, it's called chronic homelessness. And typically, outside of outlier states like Oregon and California, where homelessness is much larger, but in majority of the states, it's about 14% of chronic homeless people. So 14% of people. And those are the ones we see on the side of the streets. Those are the ones that a lot of the times do have mental health issues. They do have drug abuse or alcohol abuse issues. So they, majority of the time, do not qualify to be in the shelter. So shelters have very, very strict rules. You have to be in the shelter by certain time. So sometimes people work till late and they are not able to even enter homeless shelters. If they have any kind of serious health issues, they don't qualify to come into homeless shelters. If they have alcohol or drug abuse issue, they do not qualify. If they have mental issue, they do not qualify. So these are the people you see, and they actually cannot enter most of the time the homeless shelters that are available. There are very, very few shelters that basically will take just anybody. But I also have heard from somebody who was homeless that a lot of the times they felt more unsafe in those shelters than on the street. And so when you deal with that on top, of course, they don't want to go. And so I think homelessness is a lot more complex. And it's easier to blame the people who are in the street, right? But we also need to understand a lot of them are struggling. I mean, even drug and alcohol, it's also a disease, right? And there are not that many shelters that actually specialize in getting them clean either. And so there's lack of resources for them, and they just, get forgotten by the society. And so it's crazy, some of the, like, just, I had a whistleblower who came and said that all the major waste management companies in major cities on average kill one homeless person per month with their trucks, because homeless people sleep close to the garbage bins or inside of them. And so they just kind of get killed. And so because there's no emergency contact, nothing gets reported. I mean, this is a fact that nobody knows, right? And I'm like, how is it possible that, like, even if only one person gets killed like this, that nothing gets reported, and so there's no consequences, and there's dozens of people that get killed all over the US this way, and nothing is reported. And so they're just this forgotten people. And so we're trying to really give voice to them.
Yeah, that makes me like really sad. I didn't know about the qualification thing. So you were saying that there's very limited resource. So let's say that like I am schizophrenic or I have a disease and like I don't have any family or friends, but I do want to have like live somewhere. Or then again with schizophrenia, I mean I don't have it, so I don't really know the experience about it, like if they can have a job or in a way make money and such. So it's like what can this country do for them? Is it I feel like it's just like you just leave them behind and treat them like if they're just there. Like I can't imagine like I mean I guess this is the reality as you
Yeah.
were saying, and this is why I like to learn this from you, because I was actually like 2 days ago, literally 2 days ago, having this conversation with my boyfriend, and I had all of these questions, and I was like, you know what, like I just can't understand how like there has to be something out there to help people who are homeless. Like there has to be like certain public resources. Like for example, for people who I guess don't have like those mental health disorders or trying to, find a job, like they can go to like a library and try to apply there. Then I was thinking like, wait, do they need a library card to use those resources? Because if you need a library card, you need an address.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's kind of like what I was saying to him. I was like, how does that work? Like, let's say if I want to like I'm homeless, I'm in my car or whatever, right? I'm at that level, but and I need to get a job or want to educate myself. I go to a public library and they're like, okay, we need to see your I mean, I guess I'll have a license, but the address is not really valid, I guess. So it's like I can't get a library card. So it's like, what am I supposed to do?
It's really difficult. And that's why you need community around you. So imagine that suddenly you are a friend of a homeless person, right? And to help them, you say, hey, you can use my address as your forwarding address, right? I mean, there's just so many things we don't think about. A lot of the time, people who become homeless are basically people who deal with chronic poverty. So they grew up in a poor environment, they continue being in this low income jobs. And so they lack a lot of the times basic understanding of just everything, financial system. Like, I know there was this one woman that she didn't even understand the concept that you didn't have to spend all your money every month. She didn't understand the concept of saving money. And so simple things for you and I, oh, yeah, of course, you need to save money for a rainy day. Like, they just don't even understand that they need to do that. And it's so many other areas. I mean, from nutrition, I mean, they just, don't even know how to eat healthy. A lot of them have serious chronic diseases, and they just need a lot of help. Just, they need an advocate a lot of the time. So I look at some of them as like, they're adults, but a lot of their like knowledge base is more around teenager. And so think of it if you had a teenager, like of course you would educate them on how to open a savings account, how to, you need this and that. And so I really think that having that mentor in their lives is going to be transformative on many ways. Like two of the metrics we track is, one is recidivism. So how many people after getting out of homelessness return to homelessness? The sad statistic is that many homeless shelters have 40 to 70% recidivism. So imagine spending hundreds of thousands of dollars only for 40 to 70% of people to return to homelessness within 5 years. And so we're trying to really get them out of homelessness and never to return again. And second is the level of income, because I think with more education, more just resources and understanding of how just financial system works in this country, how to get better jobs, how to ask for more money, right? Like a lot of them feel like whatever employer offers them is what they have to accept. They don't understand the concept of negotiating your pay. Simple things like this to us is a really big mountain for them to climb, and so we need to be there to help them.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's times where like I know certain things and then I like say if I read certain comments or just see stuff on social media and in my head I'm just like, wait, isn't that common sense? But then I have moments I'm like, I don't get it. And then it's like, then you talk to more people and then you real have this realization like not everybody had the same upbringing as me. And then just realizing, you're privileged and just being grateful that where you are, where you are today. And so I grew up in I went to private school. I went to Catholic school up until 8th grade, right? And then after that, I went to a public high school because that was when like the economy was pretty bad and my parents couldn't afford to keep sending me to private school. So I feel that like going through private school and Catholic school, you have like a completely different look at life and upbringing. Like this is gonna sound really kind of funny in a way. I hope you think of it as funny. So like when you're a kid, like you just watch obviously just like kid shows or whatever, and then there's people who are like in middle school and on TV they make it seem like you're always going to get yourself stuffed in a locker by a bully or something super stereotypical. And
Mhm.
then so when I learned that I had to like go to a public school, that was my thought. I'm like, am I gonna get stuffed in a? Cause I've been bullied like in school, so I'm so used to getting bullied. So I was like, oh my god, it's gonna go from being like verbally abused, like they're gonna stuff me into a locker, and I had like this fear. Because it's like I had no idea. And like I think my point of what I'm saying is that is to just have like the realization that everybody has such a different background. And I think like it could be a very positive thing, as in like I'm learning from you today, right?
Mhm.
So I mean I don't know if you're learning anything from me, probably not, but because you're the one doing all of the education and such. But let me before I can go on a rant and such about that. But I want to transition into what you do with the Christian Professionals Network worldwide. So let's chat about that.
Yeah. So I think, I talked a little bit about kind of our mentorship program, but we have a second side to what we do. We also have a networking organization. So on that side, I bring professionals from all ages, all walks of life, all careers. And I really focus on philanthropy together. So we feature different nonprofits that are local to our area, and we do different service projects together. And then we also recruit mentors for our foundation for the homeless as well. But I think I want to kind of build a community where people don't feel lonely. I think relational poverty affects not just the homeless, but our country overall. So you hear a lot of the statistics like 1 in 5 Americans feels isolated and lonely, right? But then when you do the research, it has really significant impact on our society, not just personally. If you feel isolated, lonely, you feel depressed, you basically your productivity decreases. That has, like, there's this research that says that $9.5 billion gets lost in productivity due to feeling lonely. So imagine we're losing so much money in this country because people just don't have community around them. And I think with COVID, it just got so much worse. And so I'm trying to really bring that to everybody's attention that we do need community around each other. We do need like-minded people. And let's focus more on not necessarily doing more destructive things like, drinking too much or just like escapism, however, is it playing video games or whatever is your vice. But let's come together and let's focus on how can we make our society better? How can we really improve our community? And so we focus on that. We do different projects together. We volunteer together. We have brunches together, and so it just increases happiness. And I think like our goal is to start opening chapters of this organization nationally, because I think it's needed in every major city. You just in big cities especially, I think people feel more isolated and lonely.
Yeah, definitely, especially like LA or New York. So what my next question is, so you mentioned that you pair a mentor with a homeless person. How do you do that?
So we have this kind of safety first. So we always run background checks on both the mentor and mentees, and we have a whole application process that they fill out, and then there's this matching process to make sure that the mentor and mentees are happy with each other, and then they spend an hour a week together. And there's one meeting with the community, and we call them cohorts. So the whole cohort meets together, and then mentor and mentee can kind of figure out what they want to do together. There's obviously a lot of hardship in finding mentors because this is a long-term volunteer opportunity. In today's society, we want instant gratification. I think we want that one and done kind of volunteer opportunities to feel good. Well, this one is an 18-month commitment. So imagine you are in this for 18 months with this person. But what I'm telling them is that you're basically transforming somebody's life. When can you say that this one relationship is going to completely change a person's life for the better, and you are part of this, right? And so when we discuss this, we really talk about, listen, we know this is a long term, but this is going to be transforming not just your life, but their life. And we often talk and think about how the mentee is going to benefit, right? How the homeless person is going to benefit. But there's a whole other benefit that comes to the mentor because they know that this relationship is going to change somebody's life for the better. And also, you get a perspective. If you grew up like you going to private schools and you've never been in touch with, a homeless person before, imagine suddenly having somebody who can give you this perspective on this is what life is like when you're poor in this country, right? Like you're just expanding your horizon too. You're getting this kind of different perspective. And so I think it's enriching for both parties.
Yeah, and as you were saying that, I was just thinking, I actually like I can't believe I'm thinking about this now. About like almost 10 years ago, I actually did have like a boyfriend that was homeless.
Mm,
And yeah, so it was the level of it was he had a mother that was pretty much chased him out the door with a knife. So she was very like mentally unwell. So that's what happened to him. But he did have like a friend from like high school that took him in. So that was like his person. And then he got a job. The way I met him was that he worked at where I worked. That's how we met.
got
And
it.
then his friend was going away to college. So naturally, if he's not there, then he's like, where is he going to live? So at the time he was dating me, so I had to convince my mom and dad and be like, "Hey, so I know me and my boyfriend only been dating for like 2 months, but it's either with us or or a shelter, or the streets, who knows?" And then it was like a no brainer for them. They're like, "Yeah, like he can stay with us." So pretty much the deal was that I think he was there with us for 3 months. It was like an awkward time between his friend going to college, and he knew he got into a college that, he had obviously housing like a dorm.
Mm-hmm.
And so he stayed with us for 3 months, and then he transitioned into a dorm. And I think he served in the military and such. And that's where I think he's doing great now. I don't talk to him, but from Facebook it looks like he's doing fantastic. So that's like a prime example of what we've been pretty much talking about. And I just can't believe I just thought of that right now, where I
Yeah,
like firsthand when I like firsthand like watched it. That's I don't know
exactly.
why I didn't even think about
He,
that. But yeah,
if not for you, he would have been homeless, if not for his friends. So that's why community is so important.
I think about that now and I'm like, oh my goodness, like, well, where would he be right now?
Yeah,
Right?
his life might
Like,
have been completely different because majority of people who experience homeless go through significant abuse. And so then you're carrying that trauma, and the trauma can just spiral you out of control. And we know that. And so you potentially have saved his life. You never know.
yeah, no, I definitely did make it his life less stressful, because he did say that like at that point it would be either living with me or a shelter. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean he didn't ask, he was just like, yeah, I guess I have to go to a shelter. I don't know what I'm gonna do. And I was like, I'm
Mm,
not going to like I was like, no, me and my parents are not gonna let you live on the street or go to
mm,
a shelter. Like, why would we make your life harder when like what we did is that he like lived in our basement.
mhm,
So that's what we did, and we knew it was temporary too. And the only deal that my parents had with him is that he would like give them like $30 a week for groceries. Like that was a deal, and it was fine because he had a job, and I like drove him around because I was getting him a car, so we did what we could. And yeah, no, you're right. Like I don't know where he would be. I know he had a sister, but she lives in a different state, and I think like I think it was like something that would have been a lot more, challenging. But I do remember, I think she did come over one day and she was like crying to me, being like, "Thank you so much for taking my brother in." Like she was like so grateful, because I think she left the household earlier than him because she couldn't with the mother. Unfortunately, like I said, she was
mhm.
unwell, wouldn't get
Yeah.
help, and it was just very dangerous of living in that household. But yeah, no, I was just thinking about that now, and I'm like, I'm so glad. And I think for me, it's like a no brainer.
Mhm,
It's like such a no brainer for me to like help people. And I think that I was brought up with those values in my household. So yeah. And when you said 18 months, I personally don't think that's like such a long time. I feel like that's totally reasonable, because knowing like how long it's going to actually take for transformation, like it just makes sense. I guess this is here me thinking, oh, that's just
mhm,
common sense, but it's not to everybody, of course, because like even though I didn't have like the same experience of being like homeless to like not homeless, I've had transformations personally myself when it came to like the kind of person I am and like mental health. Like that's like my big transformation, right? And
mhm.
that didn't happen overnight. And it still does happen till today. Like, keeping up with my mental health, making sure I don't go fall back into like the toxic behaviors and such. So I think 18 months is definitely reasonable. So your goal is you definitely want to make it nationwide. Like what's your next step? Like do you have like your eye on a certain state that you want to bring it to?
Yeah, so I think we started doing strategic kind of growth beginning through bringing in board members that are outside of the state of Georgia. So we have a board member in Texas. And so we think that Dallas, Texas might be our next target market for both. So we want to start both the networking side and the foundation together, because the networking side helps kind of bring the community together, and it helps us recruit mentors, right? So every time we have a meeting, we announce, we get more mentors, and then it just becomes much easier to grow this way. And then our plan is, so once our first cohort goes through and they graduate and they get the job and they're out, we're also going to be gifting them membership in our networking. So because now we want them to come and meet more professionals and really grow in their community that way as well. And so yeah, so Texas, I think Southeast will be probably our next, just strategically. A lot of our board members are located in this region. I mean, I know that California needs a lot of help with
I
the
was just
home.
thinking that.
Yeah. So, we really, we're a faith organization, we're a Christian organization based on the name, obviously. So a lot of it is really just seeking God's wisdom. And one of the practices that I do is I go on this extended silent retreat. So it's part of my mental health issue, just getting quiet and deep inside and recharging and really seeking answers. But it also has helped me to grow the business because it just gives me so much clarity on what's next. And so I highly recommend, if you've never done a silent retreat with no electronics, it's one of the best experiences ever because you just, I mean, get so many answers and you just recharge.
I would love to go on one of those. I've always wanted to, cause
I
like
highly recommend.
yeah, like I honestly need to work on not like always being on my phone. My screen time is just embarrassing. But that's also because like I do social media management full time, so I'm like always on my phone, always on social media, and like, I'm grateful for the kind of flexibility I have in my life and the how fun my job is, but also I'm just like it's so like unhealthy to be on social media all the time, and it's like so difficult. So I feel like that silent retreat at first would I would feel like I'd be going crazy in the beginning because my brain is just like, where's the phone? Where's the phone? It's like an addiction. But then yeah, that's something I definitely need. And I honestly like would love for it to come to Florida, like your organization to come to Florida. Because I was like in my head, I'm like, I would love to mentor a homeless person. So that's why I'm like, can you come to Florida?
Well, yeah, God willing. I mean, I know that Florida also has, especially like Orlando area, Miami has a big homeless population issue. So absolutely. I mean, unfortunately, because we're a faith organization, we don't qualify for any of the government grants, or so we really rely on individuals and just private foundations to sponsor our work. Um, but you never know. We might have a big sponsor just listen to this podcast. The next thing we know, we're coming to Florida.
That would be great. I'm actually in Orlando.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm on an outskirt technically. I'm in Davenport, which is like literally you
Mhm.
get onto I-4. Orlando's like right there. But
Yep.
yeah, no, I'm out of Orlando, and which means that I do have like Orlando people listening to this podcast. So who knows? Let's manifest that here that you're gonna get a
Cool.
sponsor from Orlando because like if you do, I mean, I'm sure we'll, keep in touch like on socials or whatever. But I'm like, if you guys do come, I'm like, I would love to be involved
All
in
right.
what you do. So just putting that out there because I always hear myself like I really want to help the homeless, but I don't know what I can do. I mean, of course I know I can like donate food and do this and do that, but like I want to like directly,
Mhm.
help someone because it would be literally like the greatest gift to be able to help others. And that's like the biggest goal I have is like, so with what I do right now is like, with the mental health, like I'm building a community of like-minded people. Like that's the whole point of like the
Mhm.
mentally a badass brand. We
Yep.
are well, we have our Instagram, which is like the community, and I bring people in with like relatable content. And then we have the podcast, which is like the big part of content, and then we also have a clothing line as well. Yeah, yeah. So we have like a couple of like basically mentally a badass is like the big thing. And then it has
I
like a couple of different things underneath it. And we try like different things to just like, because there's different vehicles that we can drive people in for community. Some people will
Mhm.
like be a podcast listener. Some people are like, oh, I love how we can express ourselves through the clothing line. Like the clothing line that we have has like certain statements that like what you're feeling inside that most people wouldn't say outside. So
Mhm.
that's the point of that. But anyway, so is there anything else that you would like to tell my listeners about what you do before we end for today?
I think I just want to encourage everyone, if you feel lonely and isolated, to really seek community. And there's different ways. Obviously, you can join Justine's community. You can, find faith community. You can find some sort of hobby. I just don't know that. anybody should be alone. I think that we were created to be in this communion with each other and be connected. And so just I really encourage you to just find your tribe, because that's also going to help with your mental health, if you feel connected and healthy and you have friendships that are meaningful.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on here and providing us your wisdom and also everything that you're doing for the homeless community.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah. And if anybody wants to learn more, the easiest way is to go on our website. It's cpnworldwide.com. And you can learn about our programs there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I'll also put the website as well as like your socials in the description, so it'll be easier for them to go to your website.
Thank you.
But of course, well, thanks for everyone who's listening. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day and stay tuned for next episode.